Welcome to Charmed Life, a radio show discussing spirituality, magic, and the unconditional love of the universe. Thanks for tuning in. And I'm your host, Tricia Carr. Thank you for joining me today. Before we get started with our very ridiculously exciting episode, I want to just tell you guys, remind you that we are broadcasting live from the Universal Broadcasting Network studios in Hollywood, California, and that you can watch the archives, the video archives of Charmed Life on youtube.com/Tricia Carr. The audio is distributed as a podcast on iHeartRadio and iTunes, which you can find by searching Charmed Life with Tricia Carr. I would so appreciate it if you would subscribe, like, share, comment, and review. You can actually review on the podcast, and I just love reading those, and I thank you so much for that. But that does actually really contribute your light to this program, and I appreciate it. And I would love to tell you about a couple of other things. First of all, hello, Lightworkers Lab. I do broadcast this this show live into the Lightworkers Lab, which is a spiritual community, an online community hosted on Facebook, founded by my BFF and business partner, Crystal Ann Compton, which has been on the show many times. So I want to mention that Crystal and I have a couple of weeks left before we begin our Intuitive Intensive, which is a 12-week program designed to blast open your intuitive abilities and up-level your life in untold ways. So do find this program if you're interested in up-leveling you and connecting with your purpose and your intuitive abilities. You can find it at thelightworkerslab.com/intuitive. That's a singular intuitive. Thelightworkerslab.com/intuitive. We're very excited, and I can't wait for you guys to go and check it out and do join us. We have a few spots left, so get in on it. All right, one more thing I want to tell you about, and that is that this episode is actually about romantic partnerships. You know, the partnering, the loving, and all that kind of stuff. There are all kinds of partnerships, and quite frankly, they're all just mirrors of what's going on in our own inner life. And today we're going to talk about the romantic ones. And of course, since this show is all about spirituality and metaphysics, we're going to frame it through that lens. So I called it romantic partnerships for spiritual seekers. And I thought it only fitting that I have in studio with me my husband, Brian Carr. Now, everyone who's watching, I mention you every now and again, and you watch the show, you listen.
I do.
Isn't that sweet? I don't think any of my other friends watch the show. But my husband actually does. And besides this amazing person who's going to be contributing to this conversation, because we do have a lot to share on the topic. We've been together a very long time. I'm also welcoming back a couple of guests who have been on individually, and they are partners. We have intuitive author, artist, and echo pioneer Bridget Nielsen and Bardic Philosopher, Transformational Hip Hop poet Patrick Haize. Welcome, you guys.
Yay, thanks.
Thanks for having us.
It's so great to see you guys. And Patrick is, well, it's interesting because we have a lot of things in common. Patrick and I have basically the same name because I'm Patricia. That's my birth name. And then Patrick is a musician, and so is my husband. My husband is a composer, a film and television composer. So we have a lot of things in common.
Interesting.
Cool. Yeah, that's the law of attraction, folks. Well, I would love to hear a bit of your story about, I don't know, I guess, your story of you guys coming together, of you coupling and partnering. You know, I always start by asking my guests about their journey or their work. And since this is about, the partnership, you want to share a little bit of how you guys came together?
Yeah, sure. Do you want to do it? We always have to be like, who's doing it next? Because straight up. Let's see. He was on. It's very tied into the spiritual journey because he and I were both on that path, and he was looking for a community, spiritual community, and kind of getting off the grid and all those kinds of things. And I was too. And so we found each other right in that moment where we're like, hey, we want the same things and we're going in the same direction. Mm-hmm. And synchronicity definitely led us both to Sedona. You were in Asheville?
Yeah, I was actually planning on going back to Asheville, North Carolina to live there. But something was calling me out to Arizona, and I'd never been to Sedona before. But I'd heard it was the spiritual Mecca, so I wanted to check this place out. And so as I was traveling there to actually visit a friend in Phoenix, I figured I'd stop in Sedona for a little while. And as soon as I got to Sedona, I was like, wow, this place is powerful.
Yeah.
I ended up staying longer, and within a couple weeks of moving into a month-to-month rental, Bridget came to my house for a party, and it was history from there. I actually was a traveler that never left. So,
that's amazing. And so you had been there just a couple of months, Patrick, and Bridget, you'd been there for a few months or something?
I had been in and out for a year deciding where we were going to live, whether that was Hawaii or Shasta. And then it was like, okay, it's Sedona. And within the first day of moving to Sedona officially, that's when I met him.
So. Oh, wow. That's amazing. Brian and I have a lot of synchronicities as well with our meeting one another. And ours went like this. It was kind of like, the universe really trying to throw us into one another's paths for a while. So he lived in a place called Westlake Village, and I lived in a place called Montrose, which is by Glendale, California. And these places are about 40 minutes drive apart. They're not really that close. And I was managing a bar in my neighborhood, and Brian's best friend from college, actually, he grew up in where I was working and lived, which is also random because he didn't live there anymore, but his parents would be there. So they would go to my bar and they would meet there and they would hang out. But they only went on Friday nights, which was my only night off for like months, I think.
Yeah, a whole summer.
A whole summer. Yeah. It was weird. And then one of my friends who was also a cocktail waitress at this bar, so she wanted to go dancing all the time, weirdly, in Westlake Village where Brian lived, which is it's not like it's Hollywood. It's just a suburban area. But there was this cool place. And so she took me dancing to Brian's neighborhood, and then that's how we met. And it was just it's so weird how we kept just missing. But, it was like we were getting ready for one another. It's 11:11 right now, y'all. 11:11. Talking about synchronicities. Well, it's 12:11 where y'all are. Well, that's amazing. I love that. And Brian's actually he lived in Arizona for a while, so I just got to visit Sedona this past summer. We were there. And, oh, gosh, it is so beautiful. Really gorgeous. So how long have you been there now, then?
Well, we're now in Hawaii, but we were there for 4 years.
Oh, you live in Hawaii now?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Well, goodness, y'all just go from one spiritual mecca to another.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's great. Sedona, now, Bridget, you wrote an article once about the chakras of Gaia, right? I remember reading that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so Sedona holds one of the chakras of Mother Earth. Can you talk a little bit about that? I know we're going to be talking about partnerships, but I find that fascinating.
Yeah, it's technically a vortex. So the chakra energy technically comes down, like it spirals down in, and the vortex energy comes up from Earth, like up this way. And so like here in Hawaii, it's like the energy rings down, which is the chakra energy, and this is connected to the heart chakra. Well, this island, all the islands are different. But then Sedona energy, for anyone that's there for any like moment in time, it's just like like this generator and pulsing of this yang vortex energy. It's real. It's intense, right?
Yeah,
it's a powerful place.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, well, I think a good way of describing it is there's so much iron oxide in the land there, and it gets struck by lightning more than any other place on the planet. So it's really like a battery. It holds a really strong charge in the land. So that's why I think a lot of people have such accelerated experience and so much heightened energy.
Right. Yeah, Brian likes that. He likes when there's some kind of physical explanation to it as well.
I think it's just easier for me to relate to.
Yeah.
Yeah, when there's some kind. That's kind of the balance of our relationship. A lot of times she'll have a feeling or something, and I'll ask a question, and it will generate a response like you just gave.
That balance. So we need that balance, right? Yeah. No, I love that. And I actually love that so much because I think that's one of the benefits of a partnership is helping one another to either ascend or ground is one way to look at it. How does that work for you guys? How do you balance one another?
Well, it's like you were saying, it's a lot of it is, and it's also masculine and feminine energy, the two things we're just talking about right there, where naturally women seem to be, or the feminine energy is more intuitive and more emotional and more feeling, where the masculine is more linear and more mental and more rational. And so having both sides of that, and that does, masculine and feminine isn't limited obviously to male or female,
right.
But those are the energies you're playing with. And typically, you know, the male will have more masculine energy and the female will have more feminine energy. So finding the balance between those two really brings more of a holistic experience.
So you have sort of that, like what Brian and I have, Bridget being the airy fairy intuitive floating around.
We definitely both have our moments.
Yeah.
Of either side, but in general, yeah, I would say that I'm like your husband in the sense that I sometimes ask more. Okay, well, how does this relate to logic and like some sort of grounded explanation that I could explain to just anybody, and that brings more of that out with her. But then what she brings out in me is you know, sometimes getting out of my head and being able to just let go and free flow, and that's you know, extremely valuable on both sides.
Yeah, that's definitely, I actually get really excited, Bridget. I don't know if you do. When I am trying to communicate a feeling, something that is so expanded, and Brian will ask me something like, but what does that look like? And I'm like, ooh, yeah, that's cool. I don't know.
Totally. I'm like, how do I put that into words? How do I explain that? And he's like, I'm still not getting it on like that mental level, but he's very empathic. So he can tune in and like attune to the energy.
Yes.
But it's great. It's actually like really expanded me to be able to explain things. And I think people probably could see even from my videos from like before I met him to like now, there's a big difference because he's really expanded that part of me, which is part of relationship, right?
Well, and it is part of relating, because when Brian asks me, what does that look like? And he as well he's highly sensitive and he's very empathic. And so he can tune in, and then he's always pulling it through and asking me, he sort of he does both. And I'm sure this is what Patrick does as well. He'll kind of be like engaging in the feeling, but also engaging in that other terrace of what does it look like and how can we make this linear? And that is a matter of relating to humans, you know, on a broad scale, because not necessarily everybody is just like, oh, we don't need words, we just feel things, man, you know. And the whole reason we feel so much is because we want to relate. So I mean, that's what I think, at least. Jarvis is laughing. Jarvis, my producer, by the way. Hello, everyone. Everyone always wants to say hello to Jarvis. He's an empath as well, but he's a guy in a lot of typical ways as well. So he's getting a lot of this, I think. Yeah.
That's great.
And so that masculine and feminine energy, that is definitely the divine masculine, the divine feminine. That is, we have a mix of that no matter what our physical body may be expressing. And what are some other points that help us to have balanced and awakened relationships? You guys just did a really great video on your YouTube channels. And so I know you have a lot to say on this topic.
Yeah, I think one of the big things is just starting in wholeness, because it's like we're two whole beings coming together, not two like half needing to be fixed or like there's something outside of us that then completes the other. I think that just that framework and coming from that perspective is a game changer, because if you're whole, then you're just expanding each other's holes. So I think that as first and foremost, because I think one of the egoic and also like programmed reasons for relationship is that fulfillment of that which we don't see in ourselves. And when we can see it as that which is reflected from outside that is within ourselves, it's much more empowering. And I think that actually like leads to true success in relationship rather than neediness. So I think that's a huge one.
Brian and I were talking about that on the car ride over to the studio. I was saying that, you know, it's very typical or it's common for people to be mirroring their relationship with their parents or a parent in their partnership. And we don't have that as much, but we both had these kind of benchmarks right before we came together where we set some boundaries or kind of completed some part of that relationship with the parent. And so it's, of course, you know, the path is more like a spiral. So I'm not saying that I'm completely done with my parental relationships forever, but we tend to, what reflects in our relationship tends to be the mirror of the self-love rather than the mirror, me talking about my self-authority being placed with my parent or something. I actually tend to put that in work. Daddy is work to me. So that mirroring, and how does someone know how to achieve that, even if they're all, let's say you're in a relationship and you feel like, well, I'm not as whole. I've just started this I have this awakening experience. Many people who follow this show and follow your channels are sort of having this awakening or ascending experience. So what can someone do? And do they have to leave the relationship if it's not, sort of calibrated to that kind of growth? Or how does it work if they have to come to seek that wholeness while they're already in a relationship? What do you guys think about that?
Well, I think it's as simple as if you're already in a relationship and you're having, an awakening, there will be a time where you're going to need to kind of take an inventory and honestly decide whether this relationship is going to give you the freedom to continue to expand or whether it isn't. And if it's not, then it is time to leave that relationship. But oftentimes there's a lot of room before, needing to leave a relationship. And if there's some foundational, key points that had already been built with a particular person, there's a lot of progress that can be made staying together. So it's like, and as far as some of the key points, so it would be like, well, do you guys both have each other's best interest at heart, or is it like a selfish thing? Are you together for what you can get, or are you together for what you can share? And if you're together for what you can share and you're both supporting each other's evolution, you may be on different pages, but you don't always have to be on the same page as long as you're supporting each other.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
I like that.
I like that too. And you guys came together when you were sort of on that path in that particular way. I mean, it's a process, but still, just for sake of argument, had your awakening. And well, Brian and I had been together. How long had we been together before I started to open up? I like to just call it a metaphysical opening because I had a spirituality. I had some dogma and social conditioning that was keeping me from connecting with it in a really full way for me. Does that make sense? So some people call that an awakening. And we've been together like 10 years or 12?
Around there.
Something like that. Yeah. Oh, maybe 11 years. And so we actually did have to weather something really crazy happening for me. I didn't believe that the consciousness even existed past the physical body. And the next thing I know, I'm talking to dead dogs and dead humans. So that was really radical for us. And we had to hold on. What was that like for you, honey?
Yeah, no, that's a good way to put it. We had to sort of negotiate how we were going to relate to each other after you headed down this path so vigorously and so openly. And I didn't have the exact same experience, and I wasn't certainly in the realm professionally of doing that. So there was some digging to do, and there was some, it's not like we fought about anything. It was just, oh, okay, there's some space here now because you've gone this far down this road. I need to go with you, and we need to go negotiate that, how I can go with you. And so, Patrick, like you said, the balance starts to form. Once you start asking questions and you start being able to relate on those levels, it sort of levels itself like water, So after we were able to establish some of the ways we were going to relate, after you started having these experiences, it became really amazing. It became really fascinating to me, really.
Yeah.
And that challenge really builds deeper trust, and it really builds
totally
closeness.
Totally.
So it's really those challenges that you work through. Then afterwards, when you come out on top of it, you're like, okay, we're even that more solid. You're even that more bonded. So
absolutely.
Appreciating those. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are some other areas that you guys discovered as you've been on this path together, individually and together? I mean, you guys do some work. I mean, you work together pretty much as well, right?
Kind of, yeah.
We do the
with
retreats.
Right.
We do the retreats.
Oh.
together.
What are the retreats like? Yes, talk about the retreats.
Well, the other component we need to add to the conversation, because it's been a part of our relationship, is we moved in together like a few weeks after meeting each other into community. So we lived with one other to 4 or 5 other people at any given time. And so our relationship, like our sub relationship, was part of another like community relationship, which was part of the individual relationship. So there was a lot of complexity, and I feel like that was like one of the bigger challenges actually, was like having all these different kinds of relationships and interpersonal dynamics and the challenges of that. But as far as working together in retreats, it's been really fun because we bring up, because it's very much, it needs to be very self-supportive, because you're working with a lot of different people in this like sacred site, doing these things like jumping in the ocean or walking up these red rocks. And it's like having each, like Patrick and then me and then Sandra and Kirk, the other ones that do it with us, be on the path and be like supporting people in their own individual ways. So it's really just like more people to assist the group and then give their individual gifts to the bigger retreat theme. So that's been really fun to do it that way. So that it's very supportive. It's not just like one person carrying it. It's like we're all, carrying it with each other, and it's very tribal in that way.
Ooh, that's beautiful. And how often are your retreats? You do several a year?
Yeah. I and then as a group, we because I did some on too, but we did 7 last year, which I was like, that's crazy. And this year we have one coming up just in a few weeks here in Hawaii, and then we're going to be doing 2 to 3 this year. So really taking it, going back in, taking care of ourselves.
That's amazing. And the next one you said, I'm sorry, I broke up a little bit, is in Hawaii. When is it?
In 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
Oh, great. Okay, so your registration is all set on that, huh?
Yeah, it's sold out. So but it's going to be so exciting.
That's great. So now a lot of people in the community of, spirituality and consciousness seeking, we hear a lot the term soulmate and twin flames. So if you guys address that, do you get asked that a lot, especially since, people know you as this wonderful couple? Do you get asked, are you soulmates or twin flames? Is that something you've addressed in your work?
Well, that's definitely terminology that we hear, for sure. That's, big buzzwords in the spiritual or conscious community, whatever you want to say. And there's a lot of different interpretations of it. So it's one of those slippery words, but I guess relationships just as slippery too. What does it actually mean, right? And I think that some of what, of how I can interpret it in, the best universal sense that I can, is that, a soulmate or a twin flame has this connotation that they're 2 aspects of the same thing. Mm-hmm. Right. So it's like 2 aspects of the same consciousness or the same soul. So your soulmates or your twin flames, you're part of, the same flame. And the truth that I really resonate with in that is that we are all one consciousness, but it's beyond just one individual person. So we're one with all consciousness in the entire universe. Though there may be specific expressions of that one consciousness that in this lifetime we decide to spend more time around or play very important key roles with. And so I think this is the term that, twin flame or soulmate is really speaking about. It's speaking about those people that are really important in your life that you connect with, that in many ways give you that reflection of seeing yourself as part of something bigger, part of a bigger form of consciousness, so that you can then act more as like a collective consciousness that's expressed maybe as 2 people instead of just one. But this kind of relationship can happen with anyone. A perfect example of that is people in a band playing music together, where they're all playing as one consciousness. And they're intuitively being able to anticipate what the next person's going to do and how the flow of the music is flowing. And they create very beautiful things because of that, because they've really kind of merged as one. So a twin flame is 2 people that have really kind of merged as one, and then they're accelerating and accentuating each other's expression through that harmony. That's
beautiful. And I get asked it every now and again. I get asked it actually fairly frequently. It seems to come in waves. And usually the first thing I start with is because someone will ask me like, I have a twin flame and it's so painful. I'm like, then drop, if it's painful, drop that language. a tool is only supposed to be helpful. A tool isn't supposed to make things difficult. You wouldn't be continuing to hammer a nail into a wall if the hammer was like shredding your hand. You'd be like, well, then that hammer's not helping me enough. You know, it's counterproductive. And
I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
That to not get trapped in the name of, oh, this is my twin flame, therefore we're basically stuck together forever, and I need to make this work with this person because there's no other person.
Yeah, the whole predestination idea is really what we're calling into, you know, and it's either you believe in free will or you don't believe in free will. That's how I see it.
Right. Free will. You have free will, and there's no choice about that.
You know, it's funny. I was really mulling over free will in my mind the other day. I think my guides were talking to me about it. And literally, like, you can believe in free will or not believe in free will, but there's not really gray area. And because you can think, okay, well, it's all singularity. So this is all God. Therefore, there is only one will. So yeah, you can see it that way, but at the same time, that's not helpful all the time to think of it that way, because then you're going to be paralyzed in making any choices, because then you see what I mean? It just depends on the perspective, whether you're contracted or expanded in what you're looking at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the free will is a paradox. It's one of those things where it's like, one way of looking at it is that there is this ultimate divine will, and your free will is the choice to align with who you truly are or to resist who you truly are. So you have the free will of resisting. But then ultimately underneath, you are what you are. So is there really freedom there?
Right.
I mean, so I don't know. It's one of those paradoxes that we must embrace.
Absolutely. All right. So back to relationships. I love going on tangents, and you guys are so fun to go on tangents with. And even though I'm saying, okay, back to relationships, I really want to talk to Bridget about the conference in Spain. I watched the video because Bridget's work, she works with disclosure and hybrid children and ETs and all of that kind of stuff. And even though we want to talk, let's talk about that if we can. I'd love to talk about that video, and I encourage folks to go to Bridget's YouTube channel and find that talk. It was really great, Bridget.
Thank you. Thanks.
Would you tell folks, I forget the title of it, tell folks the title of your talk, and what was the conference again in Spain?
Yeah, so the conference was the Ufology World Congress, and they're doing another one this year. And it was half Spanish and English, which was the coolest part to me. It was the coolest part because it brought together those two worlds of consciousness. Like, I didn't even know that there was like millions and millions and millions of Hispanic people having these awakenings the way that they are. I assumed, but it was so cool to be connected with all of these major players in consciousness in the Hispanic world and just merging those two cultures. So that, first and foremost, was just awesome. Bridging those. And for me, that talk was about hybrid children. And I think that's the name of it too. And it was really good because I don't think there's been a formal presentation about hybrid children yet. And so it was really great to bring it to, again, both of those cultures and share about it.
Well, I definitely picked up some information from your talk that I had not realized, that part of how the hybrid children, so let's talk about the hybrid children are actually, they're Bridget, you should. The hybrid children are children who are hybrid human and hybrid ETs, specifically grays for the most part, but not entirely. Right, Bridget?
Yeah, and they've taken our genetics that have different brighter extraterrestrial genetics like the Palladian or Syrian within our own genetics and then enhance those. So yeah, it's a hybridized between us, our human genetics, and extraterrestrial genetics and gray genetics, and those kids were created in different programs, and some of those kids are just, they've created whole civilizations. And in some cases, they have these hybrid kids that are then our children that will return to Earth as long as we remain on a positive timeline, because it's one of those things where these different veins of possibility is determinate by the frequency that we live by and how we create our world and reality.
And so that was the part that I picked up, was I didn't realize that there was a potential or a possible plan for these hybrid children to return to Earth to act as sort of a first contact, a bridge for us to be able to work more physically with ETs and more ascended races to be able to help our ascension. That's I didn't realize that was a part of it. Now, have any of the hybrid children potentially come, and are they here?
Some have landed, some people physically on Earth,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't stay necessarily. It's like an in-between, like they're on spaceships, like waiting and seeing what we're doing, because it's one of those things where the powers that have to fully be out of the way for this other energy in. Like they don't exist in the same realm
Mm-hmm.
where the like military industrial complex exists.
Yeah.
So there's work to do like on our part to have that overriding energy of consciousness really pervade and what we do in the civilization, so that these other civilizations and the full global conversation can really take place and that physical landing.
Brian's actually pretty well educated, and he's been into ufology, and you've been really...
I'm fascinated by it. I don't know how educated I'd
You've been
qualify
really
myself, but...
You've been attuned to it, I would say, and before I had my opening, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, this is interesting because this ties into what Daryl Anka, is that his name?
Yeah, Daryl. You guys know Daryl, who channels Bashar, who is an Asasani, I think they're fifth dimensional extraterrestrial being, and Daryl Anka is the name of the channel. Yeah.
Yeah, well, he just mentions a similar paradigm where where when he tries to connect with Bashar or his people, he has to raise his vibration so high, and Bashar has to lower his so low. I mean, it doesn't surprise me what you're saying about the military-industrial complex at all, because that's such a low. Violence is such a base reaction as a human, and it's just I can imagine that's not something we'd be able to relate with them on.
Right.
It's not a level we'd be able to sustain with them, and Daryl kind of said the exact same thing. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Brian's father is a career pilot and also a fundamentalist Christian. So, you know, as a fundamentalist Christian, the conventional kind of perspective, it's hard to think about things like that. I mean, it's not really included in the dogma. But when Brian's asked him about, like, have you seen things? He's like, let's just say that things have been seen. You know, it can't be denied when you see it with your physical eyes.
Totally.
So, okay, now, thank you so much for sharing about that, Bridget. But yes, back to relationships. So I know that you must have folks who come to you and say, I really am looking for my partner. But, you know, it's sort of like this lack of the partnership is sort of attunes you to not being able to find the partnership. Do you have tips for folks to be able to, of course, we talk about becoming whole in oneself. How can one sort of start to attune to that partnership when, you know, they're in that position?
Self-love.
Self-love, right?
It all starts with self-love, right? So you want to attract a loving partner that can give you that mirror. You have to work on the other side of the mirror. So you have to start loving yourself. And when you're truly loving yourself and in a high vibration and enjoying your life and excited about life, you're going to attract somebody that's excited about you also. If you're not excited about yourself, then how can you, in a sense, convince someone else to be excited about you also?
Right.
So, you know, otherwise, then it's, you know, and this is where people get into trouble is using gimmicks to connect with other people, or putting up false fronts. Because then things might be kind of exciting in the beginning, but then when the reality sets in, all the shadow comes up, and then things get ugly. So ultimately, really what it's about is loving yourself first. And so what kind of relationship do you have with yourself? How are you speaking to yourself inside your head? What mission do you have? Are you excited about what you're doing? Because if somebody's not excited about what they're doing, but they are yearning for a relationship, what happens is the second they get in a relationship, their entire life becomes that relationship. And they start repelling the other person away because it's unattractive to have that kind of like a clingy neediness. It's actually kind of creepy sometimes too. Probably experienced that. Everyone's probably experienced that at one point.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone has.
So back to self-love.
Yes.
Really.
And you know what? Something that's come up the past year, because I do coach, I have a course for empaths and I coach empaths. And a lot of people who are highly empathic tend to unconsciously for a long time do a lot of the emotional work for people in their lives. And I had a client recently, and with her partner, she was really needing him to kind of step up. She couldn't, and asking him, like, how do you feel, or what do you want? And he was like, I don't know. And I was like, yeah, he doesn't know, because you're doing his feeling for him. Quite frankly, you need to give him the space, and you pull back a little bit, literally pull back some of your energy, and that's what an empath does, is reaches out into other people's field and energy bodies and is attempting to heal them. But if you pull that back, then there's going to be a void that he's going to be asked to fill. And then we're going to really find out what's happening. And sure, that seems a little scary, but it's not working right now,
Yeah, it definitely helps to build the magnet. Another thing, we were having dinner with our friend Dr. Joe, and he mentioned after watching our last video that we should bring this other key point in, which is very valid. And this is the idea that love is not something that is reserved just for another person. Love is actually a vibration. It's a sense of it's a way of being. And so this idea of falling in love with another person creates a kind of like a love object outside of you, in which it from a limited perspective, you then only give yourself permission to feel love when this other love object is in your presence. Whereas a more enlightened perspective of conscious relationship is that you can come into this space of love and be in this space of love, regardless of who's around you or regardless of what the circumstances are, but knowing that it's a place to live from. And ideally, in a conscious relationship, what you find is someone else that has learned how to live in that space also, so that you can both live in a space of love and share that with each other, but that it's not limited to the identity of that love object or another person in which you project your love onto.
That's so true. And speaking of projecting, that is something that very sensitive people have to manage as well, is learning when something that they're actually projecting from their own place. I mean, sensitive people are, I picked up someone else's feelings, and it's not that that's untrue. It's just that sometimes you're also projecting from an unhealed space of your own and objectifying someone else, and objectifying, which the reason the inner being is doing that is so that you can look at it. But, a conversation can be a healthy way to look at it rather than actually putting it upon someone. And it all really is, since we all are energy, and, the law of attraction, or however you want to phrase it, but since we're energy, the way that we actually attract or create love in our life is to be love, like you say, then the universe is that literal. So if romance is something that you desire and you want to manifest, then self-romance would be the way to begin to vibrate to that. And that's something actually I get the guidance when I'm doing intuitive readings with people sometimes, when they need to be developing their self-love. You can actually do some self-romance, almost rituals, whether it's buying yourself flowers or taking a salt bath or anything like that. Really taking time, and if you want to externalize it, that can actually help to bring it to your attention even more strongly. Self-romance, but self-love, self-care, respecting yourself. You guys talked about that. Patrick, you were talking about how you respect yourself, and you mentioned it here today about if you have self-script that is condemning and it's rude, then there's no way to really attract a partner that wouldn't also be mirroring that. Definitely.
And essentially you end up convincing whoever you're around to that you are what you think you are. So you can put on whatever front that you want to put on, and it might work for a while, but when you start getting intimate with somebody, how you think of yourself is ultimately the frequency you're putting out. And that's ultimately, in other words, nobody thinks more about themselves than the individual. Like, no one thinks more about you than you.
Right.
So you're more invested in your own identity than anyone else is. So if you have an identity that is limiting or negative about yourself, then eventually whoever you're around, given enough time, they're going to feel what you think about yourself, and then they're going to start seeing you that way, because that's what you're putting off. So if you're talking negatively about yourself and thinking negatively about yourself, You may attract somebody that sees you through rose-colored glasses in the beginning, but eventually you're going to convince them that you are what you feel you are. And then they're going to treat you that way. So you have to love yourself and truly come into that self-respect place if you want to create that as a mirror in your relationship.
How can someone begin to increase their self-love?
Many different ways. Like you gave some good examples right away, you know, going and doing loving things for yourself. Positive affirmations is a good way to increase self-love. Conscious living. So just on a day-to-day basis, starting to be aware of how you communicate with yourself and what kind of feelings and judgments you have about yourself. And then going deeper and choosing to love yourself, choosing to look at those things that forgiveness, self-forgiveness, and then choosing to look at those things that you do appreciate about yourself and then to fuel those. So really simply is just consciously being there with yourself and giving yourself positive feedback and being aware of what you're saying inside your own head. So if you just spent 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes at night and go over kind of the thoughts that you've had during the day and how you're communicating with yourself, and then make the attempt to communicate with yourself more kindly and treat yourself kind of maybe how you would treat like a little child that you wanted to build confidence or build self-love in. So looking at yourself as a friend and trying to treat yourself how you would treat, you know, somebody that's a friend of yours. But, you know, creating that kind of relationship, looking at yourself as a relationship and not just kind of like this like thought box that runs around and doesn't pay attention, but like really what's going on with me? You know, how am I treating myself?
Affirmations. So Brian actually does affirmations every morning. He takes his cup of coffee out and he starts his day with Mother Earth and affirmations.
It's true.
Yeah.
Every morning. Sometimes at night too.
Yeah. And, you know, actually, I remember, Patrick, you did a video sometime last year and you talked about high vibrational questions. And what, you know what I'm talking about? Why don't you explain that? Because I found that to be, it's a kind of affirmation, but it's really powerful.
Right. So what kind of questions are you asking yourself? Because the subconscious mind has the tendency to continue trying to answer whatever question you're asking internally. So it's really important for you, and it'll answer it in many different ways through showing you different experiences or just tuning you into different nuances or aspects of your reality that then kind of answer that question for you. So what's really important is being aware of what questions you're actually asking yourself. For example, if you're asking yourself the question of, why can I never find a lover?
Your subconscious mind says, here's why.
Mind is like, well, this is why you can't find a lover. And it starts giving you all these examples for why you can't find that. So it's being aware of what kind of questions you're truly asking and fine tuning those questions. So it could be like, why would a lover love to be with me? Why would someone else love to be with me? And see, a question like that moves into self-love. You start asking, why would someone love to be with me? And then the next time you're having a really funny thought, you're like, yeah, because I'm funny. Or next time you're like, come up with a really interesting idea, you're like, oh, because I bring really interesting ideas through. So the types of questions we ask has a large effect on what we perceive in our reality and what we're tuned into.
That's really great. It seems like a nuance to shift from why can't I find a lover to why would a lover love me? That is, it seems really subtle, and you're not having to start from this place of I'm wonderful and I fully accept everything about me. You're not faking something, you know. You're actually just shifting it enough so that the subconscious mind / the field, because your subconscious mind is literal and it is your personal representation of the field, will just answer it literally. It doesn't say, are you sure? Do you want to ask that question? Are you sure you don't want to? So that subtle shift that's what you begin to, those are the answers that begin to come up for you. And that's wonderful. It is a different kind of affirmation. Patrick, you could write a whole program on that.
He's really good at that. He's good at all that stuff.
Yeah, he's good at things.
Yeah, he's really good at that. There's something too on the empathic level, because you've been talking about like your empathic clients. I like the idea of taking space to get to know yourself, because I think that we haven't even taken the time and space to find out like who we are. And especially say if we're living in cities and we're empathic and we're just like job, social media, like there's not been a time where you can like back up and then there's not any stimulus to then realize who you are and then realize and get clarity on your future, like visioning of like who you want to be and like what you're interested in and what your energy is and what your boundaries are, and to clarify that so that when you're in relationship, you know what that is, even though you're meshed with someone else's energy, you have that anchored in. So for me, that's really helpful. And that's one of the reasons why I go into nature a lot, or like we'll go live in a place in the middle of nowhere or those kinds of things, and just being silent or taking that time and space to go, okay, who am I? What is my energy? And what am I going towards? So that can then flow with the other person.
Yes, nature and animals, they are a great way to build self-love because, you know, when you're holding your cat, like I have 1,000 cats, and
it's not 1,000
yet. But with your animal, like your domestic, your family member, and they are just pouring love into you. They mean it, and they really, really understand you, and they get who you are. And in spite of the fact that they can feel your own self-judgment, they love you that much, and that unconditionally. And nature as well. When you're out and you feel the breeze, that breeze is there for you. The breeze is actually reaching out to you. It isn't that you happen to just be in nature. You are a part of nature. The breeze and the trees and the flowers that are beckoning you, it's real. That's real stuff. And that's how loved you are. That's how much love, how you are love. You actually are that. I live in the middle of a city, but I try not to leave the house very much, and I just kind of bury myself in cats. Really helps.
That's good. I like that.
That's why we keep collecting them, and birds.
I suppose.
we have
the city Snow White.
What's that? Sorry?
The Snow White of Los Angeles.
Ace Ventura.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I am, I'm an animal communicator, so that's a big part of my work.
Yeah.
We have just a few minutes left, so would you guys like to share some of the work or some of the work that you're doing, how people can get in touch with you, or any final thoughts on relationships?
One thing I was actually thinking, a final thought on the relationship, when you were saying how important it is to understand yourself, or come to a comfortable level of knowing kind of what works for you and what fuels you. This is so key, because this is what gives you the ability to create healthy boundaries. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't know where you are, a relationship can, pull you off your feet and then just whip you around. And this is kind of how people move into relationships, where 3 years down the line, they're like, how did this happen? How has my life turned into this? How have I gone so off track and gotten into this, really spiral of unconsciousness? And that really comes back to not knowing self, and then therefore not being able to set the healthy boundaries, because boundary setting is extremely important. Mm-hmm. That's my last thought on the relationships thing. You want to share a little bit about how for people to contact you and find your work?
Yeah. Let's see. BridgetNielsen.com. It's right there on the screen. YouTube is my primary. Instagram. And let's see what's coming up. Oh, I have a hybrid online course that's going right now. In the works is probably like a healthy food course coming out too. And then we have 2 Sedona adventures, one in April that's almost full, and then one in the fall. And I'm just painting. I'm going in. I'm like enjoying my life, not working as hard. So that's what's going on for me. What about you, Patrick?
So, I have some more music coming. I've released an album called with a group called Golden Triangle. It's me and Tom Lab. You can find that through my website. I have a Bandcamp there, and I have more songs that I'm going to be releasing, more music videos within the next awesome music videos within the next few weeks. And so I have a lot of that coming. PatrickHaize.com is my website. Patrick Haize Live is my YouTube channel, so you can find me on both of those platforms. And new videos, new music, lots of fun. Connecting to nature and getting out here in Hawaii, really grounding in and feeling that island vibe. So that's been a big part of our theme recently, is to really connect with mama out here and let that that nurturing energy that is there's more yin like to our sphere, because while Sedona is beautiful, it's very yang, and we're kind of on a yang detox and moving to like a yin kind of relaxation point in our life. So
that's really beautiful. I don't think I've ever had a yin detox, though. I don't know if do we need that as much?
Have I ever had a yin detox?
Yeah. Do we need that as much as yang? It seems like we need a yang detox more than yin, generally speaking.
I think so too, right? I think the culture is really, heavily over yang.
Yeah.
And so it's in everyone's cards to relax and breathe a little deeper and get out in nature.
Yes. Brian, do you have any final thoughts on relationship?
You guys are also articulate and charismatic. I'm just going to let you carry the show to the edge of the horizon.
Well, we actually got married, how long? Almost 5 years ago, but we were together 9 years before that. We've been together a very long time. And so most of our journey together was pre my metaphysical opening. But it's interesting because the last, several years that it's been post that, I mean, you had a sort of awakening and opening that didn't happen quite as dramatically as like speaking to animals and saving an animal's life because she needed to, go to the hospital. But
that's true. Mine was more like the subtle shift you were just describing about asking a question with an open end rather than a closed end. Yeah.
But Brian has had actually, I know we have just a minute left, but I have to share because something Patrick was saying earlier reminded me of the fact that Brian's had a couple of times where he's gotten so right-brained that everything sort of starts to pixelate and all he can see is energy and he can't tell the difference between himself and the cat. That has happened to him before. Yeah.
I don't smoke anything ever, by the way. So
that's what the mystics are speaking of, that non-dual space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all real.
It reminded me of Jill Bolte Taylor's TED Talk, when she had an aneurysm in her left brain, and it was shut down. And that's when he's described it. It sounds like it's just totally right brain, and he's just in that non-dual intuitive space. So, we have the grounded guys keeping us a little bit centered, Bridget, but they can get a little out there as well, I think.
Yes, totally.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for being here today. I'm really excited about all the work you're doing. Bridget, I would love to have you back and talk more about hybrid children and the work that you're doing. And Patrick, I would love to have you back on to see the music that you're doing, the music videos. I love your music and your videos. So I hope we'll be able to get together again real soon.
Let's do it.
Definitely. Yeah, sounds like very fun. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you. It's great meeting you, both of you.
It was great to meet you too.
You too.
Thanks, you guys. Well, we will see you next week. And by the way, next week on Charmed Life, we have author Penny Pierce. I hope you guys will join our next episode. I'm super excited. She is an idol of mine, I guess. I don't really believe in worshiping things, but I'm just going to go with it. I'm just saying it. Penny Pierce will be on next week. And so I hope you'll tune in again next week, 11 a.m. Pacific. And thanks for tuning in this week. I love you, whoever you are.